Thanksgiving was supposed to be a day of gratitude and family unity. But for Matthew, it became the day his world shattered. The house was alive with warmth and chatter. His wife, Kinley, was in the kitchen, carefully arranging the cranberry sauce on a serving plate. His brother, Liam, joked with the kids in the living room, their laughter blending seamlessly with the sounds of football commentary on the TV. Matthew smiled faintly as he watched, but a gnawing sense of unease crept into his chest. He shook it off, chalking it up to holiday stress. Needing a moment of peace, Matthew slipped away from the chaos. He wandered toward the den, intending to pour himself a drink and sit by the fireplace. As he passed the dining room, he heard voices. He paused. It was his mother and father, their tones low but urgent. The words made him stop in his tracks. "Liam, don't even try to tell your brother about you and her wife's affair," his mother whispered sharply. Matthew froze, his hand hovering over the edge of the wall. "Do you want him to move back in with us, struggling with a divorce? The kids would grow up without a family. Don't ruin their happiness over her small affair. It happens to everyone. Honestly, if he were smart, he'd thank us. Without Liam, those kids wouldn't have a shot at decent genes. He should be grateful." A weight settled in Matthew's chest, pressing harder with each word. He leaned closer, careful not to make a sound. His father's voice followed, equally firm. "Okay, but when the kids turn 18, I'll tell them the truth. They have to know who their real father is." Matthew's breath caught in his throat. He staggered backward, his legs trembling beneath him. The world tilted, and for a moment he thought he might faint. His mind raced, his thoughts colliding like cars in a high-speed crash. Kinley, Liam, his children. The betrayal was a storm raging in his chest, each revelation striking like lightning. He wanted to burst into the room, demand answers, and confront them. But he couldn't. Not yet. His heart thundered in his ears as he silently retreated down the hallway. He passed the cheerful hum of the television, the aroma of roasted turkey, and the innocent laughter of his children. Each step felt heavier than the last. When he reached the bathroom, he locked the door behind him. He gripped the edge of the sink, staring at his reflection in the mirror. His face was pale, his eyes wide and unblinking. His chest heaved as he struggled to steady his breathing. "No," he whispered to himself, shaking his head. "This can't be real." But it was. The voices, the words, were seared into his mind. His mother's callous dismissal, his father's cold agreement. They had known all along. They had enabled it. A soft knock at the door jolted him from his thoughts. "Matthew." Kinley's voice was light, cheerful. "Dinner's ready. Are you okay?" Matthew straightened, forcing his expression into something resembling calm. "Yeah, I'm fine," he replied, his voice steady but hollow. "Be right out." He splashed cold water on his face, the shock of it grounding him just enough to pull himself together. He couldn't let on that he knew. Not yet. He needed time to think, to plan, to figure out what the hell to do next. As he joined the family at the dinner table, he felt like a stranger in his own home. Kinley smiled at him, her eyes sparkling as she passed him a plate of turkey. Liam cracked a joke about the burnt rolls, earning a round of laughter. Matthew forced himself to smile, to laugh, to play the part of the oblivious husband and brother. But beneath the surface, his mind churned. How long had this been going on? Were his children even his? The thought made his stomach churn. He glanced at them, innocent, happy, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around them. Whatever happened, he had to protect them. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Matthew barely tasted the food on his plate. He nodded and smiled at the appropriate moments, but his thoughts were elsewhere. Every glance between Kinley and Liam felt loaded with hidden meaning. Every laugh, every shared look felt like a dagger twisting in his chest. When the evening finally came to an end and the guests began to leave, Matthew stood at the door, thanking them with mechanical politeness. Kinley leaned in to kiss him on the cheek, her touch making his skin crawl. He fought the urge to pull away. "You were quiet tonight," she said softly as they headed to the bedroom. "Everything okay?" "Just tired," he replied, avoiding her gaze. "Long day." She nodded, seemingly satisfied, and disappeared into the bathroom to get ready for bed. Matthew sat on the edge of the bed, his hands clasped tightly together. His mind replayed the conversation he'd overheard, each word cutting deeper than the last. When Kinley emerged, she slid in a bed beside him, reaching out to touch his arm. "I love you," she murmured, her voice tender. Matthew stiffened. "Yeah," he muttered, turning off the bedside lamp. "Good night." As she drifted off to sleep, Matthew lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His mind was a whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and despair. The life he thought he had was a lie, but he wasn't about to let them destroy him. Not without a fight. In the darkness, a plan began to take shape. He didn't know all the details yet, but one thing was certain. He would not let this betrayal go unanswered. Matthew didn't confront anyone that day. Instead, he smiled through the family dinner, though every glance at Kinley and Liam made his stomach churn. He needed time to think, to plan. That night, Matthew lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Kinley slept soundly beside him, her breathing steady and untroubled. His thoughts raced, each scenario more complex and emotional than the last. Confronting her now would only lead to denials and tears, possibly even manipulation. He needed something more decisive, more permanent. By morning, his mind was made up. Matthew moved deliberately, careful not to arouse suspicion. Over breakfast, he smiled and laughed, masking the storm inside. "I've got a busy day at work," he told Kinley as he poured himself a cup of coffee. "Might be home late." "Same here," Kinley replied, kissing him on the cheek before heading out the door. As soon as she was gone, Matthew sprang into action. First, he called his workplace and took an indefinite leave of absence. Then, he contacted a locksmith. "I need all the locks on my house changed," Matthew explained. "It's urgent. Can you come today?" The locksmith agreed, and within an hour, a van pulled up to the driveway. Matthew watched silently as the man worked, each replaced lock bringing him closer to reclaiming control. Next, Matthew logged into their joint bank accounts. His hands trembled as he transferred every last dollar into an account only he controlled. Years of savings and investments moved in moments, the screen flashing a confirmation of his decisive action. He turned his attention to his children. Tommy, 8, and Sophie, 6, were playing in the living room, blissfully unaware of the upheaval about to occur. "Hey guys," Matthew called out, his voice as steady as he could manage. "How about we go on an adventure today?" "An adventure?" Tommy's eyes lit up. "Where to, Dad?" "You'll see," Matthew replied, ruffling his son's hair. He packed quickly, taking only essentials. Clothes, important documents, and cherished family photos filled the suitcases. As he zipped the final bag, a wave of sorrow washed over him. This wasn't how he envisioned leaving his home, but he had no choice. He had to protect his children and himself. By noon, Matthew had the car loaded. He buckled the kids into the back seat and handed each of them a snack. "Ready to go?" he asked, forcing a smile. "Where's Mom?" Sophie asked, her voice small. "Mom's busy with work today," Matthew said gently. "She'll catch up with us later." Satisfied for the moment, Sophie nodded, and Matthew started the car. As they pulled out of the driveway, he glanced at the house one last time. The memories they had built there felt like a cruel joke now. They drove for hours, the hum of the engine and the chatter of the children filling the car. Matthew's phone buzzed repeatedly, but he ignored it. He knew Kinley would be trying to reach him. She would have come home to an empty house, the locks changed, and the accounts drained. He could picture her shock, her frantic attempts to piece together what had happened. For now, Matthew didn't care. They reached a small town late in the afternoon. It was quiet and unassuming, the perfect place to start over. Matthew checked into a modest motel under a false name, paying in cash. As the kids explored the room, Matthew sat at the small desk and began making a list. Schools, housing, work, there was so much to consider. Later that evening, as Tommy and Sophie watched cartoons on the motel's dated TV, Matthew's phone buzzed again. This time he picked it up. Kinley's name flashed on the screen. He hesitated, his thumb hovering over the decline button. Instead, he answered, "Matthew." Kinley's voice was frantic. "What's going on? Where are you?" "The locks, the bank, the kids. What's happening?" Matthew's grip tightened on the phone. "You know exactly what's happening," he said, his voice cold and controlled. "Don't play dumb with me, Kinley. I don't understand, she stammered. Please, just talk to me. Talk. Matthew's laugh was bitter. Like you talked to Liam? Or my parents? Or anyone else you decided to drag into this mess behind my back? There was a long silence on the other end. When Kinley finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Matthew, I don't, he interrupted. Don't you dare try to explain or justify. You made your choices, Kinley. Now, you can deal with the consequences. What about the kids? She cried. They're my children too. Matthew's jaw clenched. Are they? The question hung heavy in the air. I'll be in touch when I'm ready. Until then, don't try to find us. He ended the call, his hands shaking as he set the phone down. Tommy looked up from the TV. Dad, are you okay? Matthew forced a smile. I'm fine, buddy. Just tired. As the night wore on, Matthew lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling of the motel room. The enormity of what he had done weighed on him, but he knew it was the only way. He had to protect his children, to give them a life free from lies and betrayal. And as he listened to their soft, steady breathing, he knew he would do whatever it took to keep them safe. Matthew relocated to a small town hours away, choosing a quiet community surrounded by rolling hills and dense forests. The town's anonymity was comforting, a shield against prying eyes and painful memories. With the little money he had left, Matthew rented a modest two-bedroom house near a good school. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start anew. His first priority was the kids. On their first morning in the new house, Matthew woke early to make breakfast. Pancakes or eggs? He called out as Tommy and Sophie stumbled sleepily into the kitchen. Pancakes, they said in unison, their excitement bringing a rare smile to Matthew's face. As they ate, Matthew spoke carefully. This is our new home now. Things might be different, but we're going to make it work. You guys are my number one priority. Okay, Dad, Sophie said, her voice small but trusting. Tommy nodded solemnly. After breakfast, they explored the town together. Matthew took them to the local park, where other kids played on swings and slides. He watched as Tommy and Sophie quickly joined in, their laughter echoing through the crisp autumn air. For the first time in weeks, Matthew felt a glimmer of hope. The next few months were a whirlwind of adjustment. Matthew enrolled the kids in school, attended parent-teacher meetings, and made a point of being present for every soccer game and school recital. He found work as a mechanic at a local garage, a job that kept him busy but allowed him to be home in the evenings. Slowly, life began to settle into a rhythm. Meanwhile, back in their old town, the fallout from Matthew's departure was explosive. Kinley returned home to find the locks changed, the bank accounts emptied, and no trace of her husband or children. Her frantic calls to Matthew went unanswered. She turned to her parents for help, only to be met with cold disapproval. What did you expect, Kinley? Her mother said, shaking her head. You brought this on yourself. Liam didn't fare much better. Word of the affair spread quickly, and he became a pariah in the community. Friends and colleagues distanced themselves, and family gatherings turned icy. The once charismatic younger brother found himself isolated and humiliated. Back in the small town, Matthew threw himself into fatherhood. Every decision he made was for Tommy and Sophie. He taught Tommy how to ride a bike and helped Sophie with her science projects. When Sophie asked why they didn't talk to Mom anymore, Matthew answered carefully. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, he said. But I promise you, everything I'm doing is to keep you safe and happy. Sophie seemed to accept the answer, though Matthew could see the questions lingering in her eyes. He resolved to tell them the full truth someday, when they were old enough to understand. Years passed, and Matthew's efforts paid off. Tommy excelled in soccer, earning a spot on the regional team. Sophie discovered a love for painting, her colorful creations filling their home. Matthew found joy in their achievements, pride swelling in his chest as he watched them grow into confident, happy kids. One evening, Matthew sat on the porch, watching the sunset while the kids played in the yard. His phone buzzed on the table beside him. Picking it up, he saw an unfamiliar number. He hesitated, his thumb hovering over the screen. Finally, he answered. Hello. Matthew, it's Dad. The voice on the other end was hesitant, almost apologetic. Matthew's grip tightened on the phone. What do you want? I need to talk to you. It's about Kinley and Liam. The mention of their names made Matthew's stomach turn. I've got nothing to say to them, he replied sharply. And I don't want to hear it. Please, son, his father pressed. It's important. Just hear me out. Matthew sighed, running a hand through his hair. Fine. Talk. They've hit rock bottom, his father began. Kinley lost her job. Liam, well, he's barely getting by. They've been trying to find you, to apologize. Matthew laughed bitterly. Apologize? Now they want to apologize? After 5 years? I'm not saying you have to forgive them, his father said quickly. But maybe it's time to let go of the anger. Let go. Matthew's voice rose. Do you have any idea what they put me through? What they put my kids through? His father was silent for a moment. I know, son. I know. But holding on to this, it's not good for you. Matthew's jaw clenched. He glanced at Tommy and Sophie, laughing as they chased each other around the yard. I've moved on, he said firmly. I'm not going back. All right, his father said quietly. I just thought you should know. Matthew ended the call and set the phone down, his hands trembling. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. The past might have reached out to him, but he wouldn't let it pull him back. His life was here now, with his kids, in the home they had built together. And nothing, not Kinley, not Liam, not even his father, would take that away from him. Matthew was sitting at the kitchen table, helping Tommy with his math homework, when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. An unfamiliar number. His gut told him to ignore it, but something compelled him to pick up. Hello. Matthew, it's Dad, the voice on the other end said. It was tentative, almost unsure of itself. Matthew's grip on the phone tightened. What do you want? There was a pause. Matthew, you need to come back. Liam and Kinley, they're not doing well. Kinley lost her job. Liam's business failed. They're struggling. Matthew's laugh was cold and bitter. And why exactly should I care? Because it's family, his father replied, the desperation in his voice unmistakable. And Kinley wants to apologize. She's been regretful. Matthew leaned back in his chair, exhaling sharply. Regretful? She destroyed our family. Liam betrayed me. You enabled it. Why would I ever want to see any of you again? The silence on the other end was heavy, loaded with things left unsaid. Finally, his father spoke again, his voice softer. I'm not asking you to forgive them, Matthew. I'm just asking you to listen. Matthew's eyes darted to Tommy, who was looking up at him with a puzzled expression. Everything okay, Dad? The boy asked. Matthew forced a smile. Yeah, buddy. Just a boring grown-up conversation. Keep working on that problem, all right? Okay, Tommy said, turning back to his workbook. Matthew walked into the next room, lowering his voice. Listen, Dad, you have no idea what it took for me to get where I am now, to rebuild my life, to give my kids a stable home. And you want me to come back? For what? To reopen old wounds? I understand how you feel, his father said. But people change. Kinley's not the same person she was back then. And Liam, well, he's been humbled. Matthew's jaw tightened. Humble? That's rich. You think losing some money or a job compares to what they did to me? To my kids? No, his father admitted. It doesn't. But they're family, Matthew. And family deserves a second chance. Matthew's laugh was sharp and humorless. Funny, I don't remember you preaching about second chances when I was the one who needed support. You were too busy covering for them. You're right, his father said quietly. I made mistakes. We all did. But I'm trying to make things right now. Matthew closed his eyes, pinching the bridge of his nose. You want me to drop everything, uproot my life again? For them? No, Dad. I'm not doing it. At least think about it, his father pleaded. That's all I'm asking. Matthew didn't respond. He ended the call and set the phone down on the counter, staring at it as if it might start speaking on its own. The sound of laughter from the next room brought him back to reality. He walked back into the kitchen, where Tommy and Sophie were now giggling over something on Tommy's workbook. Matthew watched them for a moment, his heart heavy. They were his everything. The thought of letting Kinley and Liam back into their lives felt like poison. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, Matthew sat on the couch, his thoughts swirling. He grabbed a beer from the fridge and stared at the label, his mind replaying his father's words. Regretful, humbled, family. He thought about the years he had spent clawing his way out of the pit they had thrown him into. The sleepless nights, the endless work, the moments of doubt when he questioned whether he was enough for his kids. And now, they wanted him to come back, to listen to apologies that were years too late. The phone buzzed again, breaking his thoughts. This time, it was a text from his father. Dad, please, Matthew. For closure. If not for them, then for yourself. Matthew stared at the message, the words blurring as anger and frustration churned inside him. He didn't need closure. He had built his own closure, brick by brick, with every sacrifice he had made for his children. But a nagging thought crept into his mind. Would hearing them out finally put the past to rest? Could facing them one last time free him from the weight he still carried? Matthew tossed the phone onto the couch and leaned back, closing his eyes. The question lingered, unanswered, as the night stretched on. Despite his resolve, Matthew decided to return, not for reconciliation, but for closure. The drive back to his old hometown was heavy with memories and emotions he thought he had buried. As he pulled up to his parents' house, his grip on the steering wheel tightened. This wasn't going to be easy, but he needed to do it. For himself, for his kids, for the closure he never got. The door opened before he could even knock. His father stood there, looking older, wearier. Matthew, he said softly, stepping aside to let him in. Matthew walked into the living room, his gaze immediately landing on Kinley and Liam. They sat on the couch, their postures stiff, their faces drawn. Kinley's eyes were red, evidence of tears shed long before he arrived. Liam looked down at his hands, avoiding Matthew's piercing gaze. You wanted to apologize? Matthew said, his tone cold, almost clinical, as he took a seat opposite them. Kinley's lips trembled as she tried to speak. Matthew, I don't even know where to begin. Start with the truth, Matthew said sharply. Something you didn't seem too fond of back then. Kinley's tears spilled over as she spoke. I was a fool. I let my selfishness, my stupidity ruin everything. I've missed you. The kids. I missed us? Matthew interrupted, his voice rising. You didn't think of us when you were sneaking around with Liam. You didn't think of the kids when you destroyed their family. Kinley's sobs grew louder, but Matthew didn't soften. He turned his attention to Liam, his eyes blazing. And you had the audacity to sit at my table, to smile in my face, to pretend to be my brother while stabbing me in the back. Liam finally looked up, his face a mask of shame. Matthew, I have no excuse. What I did was unforgivable. I betrayed you. Stop, Matthew said, cutting him off. I don't want your excuses. I don't want your pity. I want to know why. Why would you do this to me? Liam swallowed hard, his voice shaky. I was jealous. You had everything, a beautiful family, a successful career. And I felt like I was always in your shadow. I let that jealousy consume me. But it wasn't worth it, Matthew. It wasn't worth losing you. Matthew shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. Jealousy? That's your excuse? You destroyed my life because you couldn't handle being second best? Kinley reached out, her voice desperate. Matthew, please. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging you. For the kids, can we find a way to move past this? Matthew stood abruptly, pacing the room. The kids? Now you care about the kids? Do you even know what it took to keep them safe and happy after you left? Do you know how many nights I stayed up, wondering if I was enough for them? Kinley's sobs filled the room, but Matthew didn't stop. He turned to his father, who had been silent until now. And you knew, and you said nothing. You sat there and let them betray me, and you told yourselves it was for the best. His father's face crumpled. Matthew, I thought I was protecting you. Protecting the kids. Protecting me? Matthew's voice was incredulous. By lying to me? By enabling them? You didn't protect me. You destroyed any trust one had in this family. The room was silent except for Kinley's quiet sobs. Matthew took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. I didn't come here to forgive you. I didn't come here to make things right. I came here to tell you that I've moved on. I built a life for myself and my kids, a life without lies, without betrayal. And I'm not going to let you or anyone else disrupt that. Kinley looked up, her face pale. But Matthew, what about us? There is no us, Matthew said firmly. Not anymore. You made your choices, and I've made mine. I came here to give you the chance to say your piece. But now it's time for me to go. He turned to leave, but Liam's voice stopped him. Matthew, wait. I know I've lost the right to call you my brother, but I'm sorry. For everything. Matthew paused, his back to them. I'm glad you're sorry. But sorry doesn't fix what you broke. Without another word, Matthew walked out the door, leaving them behind. As he drove away, he felt a strange mix of emotions, anger, sadness, relief. The confrontation hadn't given him the closure he hoped for, but it reaffirmed one thing. His life was better without them in it. The air in the room was heavy, the tension palpable. Matthew stood near the doorway, his fists clenched at his sides. Just as he was about to leave, his father spoke, his voice trembling. Matthew, wait. There's something else. The kids, they're yours. We lied. Matthew froze in his tracks. The words hung in the air, almost incomprehensible. He turned slowly, his expression a mixture of disbelief and fury. Lied? Lied about my children, about my family? Why? His father's face was pale, his hands fidgeting nervously. We thought we were protecting you. Matthew's laugh was harsh and bitter, cutting through the silence like a knife. Protecting me? You destroyed my trust, my family, my sense of reality. And now, you want forgiveness? Kinley sobbed louder, her head buried in her hands. Liam looked down, his face a mask of guilt. Matthew's father took a hesitant step forward, his voice pleading. We didn't know what else to do. We thought if you believed they weren't yours, it would make the divorce easier, that you'd let go and move on. Matthew's voice rose, shaking with anger. Let go? You thought I'd let go of my own children? Are you even listening to yourself? Do you have any idea what it's like to live with that kind of doubt? To look at them every day and wonder if they're really mine? Kinley finally lifted her tear-streaked face. Matthew, I'm so sorry. I don't. Matthew snapped, cutting her off. You don't get to apologize. Not for this. Not after everything you've done. Liam cleared his throat, his voice low. Matthew, I swear I didn't know they were yours. I thought they might be mine. That's why. Matthew's glare was icy. That's why you thought it was okay to ruin my life. To sleep with my wife? You thought you were entitled to everything I had because of some twisted idea that you were better than me? Liam's shoulders slumped, and he looked away, unable to meet Matthew's eyes. I was wrong. I was selfish. Selfish doesn't even begin to cover it. Matthew shot back. He turned to his father. And you've been lying to me for years. You let me believe a lie to protect them, to protect their betrayal. His father's voice cracked. We thought it was for the best. We thought if you moved on. Moved on? Matthew repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. You thought I'd just move on from my own children? From the people who betrayed me? You didn't protect me. You broke me. The room fell silent again, the weight of Matthew's words settling over everyone. Kinley spoke up, her voice trembling. Matthew, please. The kids deserve to know the truth. They deserve to have their father in their lives. Matthew stared at her, his eyes cold. You don't get to decide what they deserve. You don't get to play the victim here. He paced the room, his mind racing. Memories of the past years flashed through his mind, the sleepless nights, the relentless effort to provide a stable life for his children, the nagging doubt that had always lingered. Now, that doubt was gone, replaced by a rage he could barely contain. You know what the worst part is? Matthew said, his voice quiet, but laced with venom. It's not even about the betrayal anymore. It's about the fact that you took away my choice. You took away my right to know the truth, to make my own decisions. His father stepped forward again, his voice breaking. Matthew, we were wrong. I see that now. But please don't punish the kids for our mistakes. They need you. Matthew turned to his father, his jaw tight. Don't you dare bring them into this. I've been there for them every step of the way, despite everything. You don't get to act like you care about what they need now. Kinley's tears fell silently as she watched Matthew, her expression one of despair. Matthew, I know I've lost your trust, but please, don't take it out on them. Matthew took a deep breath, his fists clenching and unclenching as he tried to rein in his emotions. I'm not taking anything out on them. I've been the only constant in their lives. I've given them everything I have, and I'll keep doing that, no matter what. But as for the rest of you, he shook his head, his voice firm. You've lost the right to call yourselves my family. Family doesn't do this. Family doesn't lie, doesn't betray, doesn't manipulate. You've destroyed that bond, and there's no coming back from it. Matthew grabbed his jacket, heading for the door. His father called after him. Matthew, wait. Please, let's talk about this. Matthew paused at the doorway, his back to them. There's nothing left to talk about. I'll tell the kids the truth when they're ready. But as far as I'm concerned, this is the end. Without another word, he walked out, the door closing behind him with a finality that echoed through the house. As he got into his car, Matthew felt a mix of emotions, anger, betrayal, and an odd sense of relief. The truth had finally come out, and while it hadn't brought him peace, it had brought him clarity. Driving away, he resolved to focus on the only thing that mattered, his children. They were his priority, his reason for moving forward. The rest of it? The lies, the betrayal, the so-called apologies? They were in the rearview mirror, exactly where they belonged. Matthew left that night, the sound of the door shutting behind him echoing in his ears as he walked to his car. The drive back home was quiet, but his thoughts were loud and chaotic. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, each mile a reminder of the distance he was putting between himself and the family that had betrayed him. As the miles passed, the weight on his chest began to lift. By the time he pulled into his driveway, his resolve had solidified. He didn't need their apologies or their validation. He had his children and the life he had worked so hard to rebuild. That was all that mattered. The next morning, Matthew focused on routine. He made pancakes for breakfast, laughing as his daughter smeared syrup on her nose and his son proudly showed off his tower of bacon. These moments reminded him why he had fought so hard to protect them from the truth for as long as he had. They were his priority, his reason for moving forward. Meanwhile, back in his old hometown, Kinley and Liam's lives began to unravel. The community they once relied on had turned against them. The news of their betrayal spread like wildfire, and the whispers followed them wherever they went. Liam's business, already struggling, couldn't survive the hit to his reputation. Clients dropped him, and he was forced to close his doors. Kinley, having lost her job months earlier, found it nearly impossible to secure new employment. Every interview seemed to end with a polite smile and an awkward excuse. Their relationship, built on secrecy and betrayal, couldn't withstand the pressure. Arguments became a daily occurrence. "This is your fault," Kinley screamed one evening, her voice echoing through the small apartment they had downsized to. "My fault?" Liam shot back. "You're the one who couldn't keep your mouth shut. If you hadn't begged Matthew to come back, none of this would have blown up." Kinley's face turned red with anger. "Don't you dare blame me for this mess. You're the one who couldn't handle living in Matthew's shadow." Their shouting matches became so frequent that neighbors began complaining. The once close pair found themselves more alone than ever, their relationship crumbling under the weight of their choices. Back in his new town, Matthew's life took a different turn. He threw himself into his children's lives, attending every soccer game, science fair, and parent-teacher conference. His children thrived, their laughter filling the house as they grew more confident and happy. For Matthew, these moments were the antidote to the pain of the past. It wasn't long before Matthew met someone new. Her name was Amber, a kind and compassionate woman who worked as a teacher at his children's school. Their connection was immediate but unhurried. Amber respected Matthew's boundaries, understanding the scars left by his previous relationship. Their first date was simple, coffee at a small cafe near the park. "So," Amber said, stirring her latte, "your kids speak highly of you. Your daughter told me you make the best pancakes." Matthew chuckled. "I've had years to perfect the art. Pancakes are my Saturday morning specialty." Amber smiled. "It's obvious how much you love them. They're lucky to have you." Matthew hesitated for a moment before replying. "I'm the lucky one. They've given me a reason to keep going. Even when things were tough, As their relationship blossomed, Amber became a steady presence in Matthew's life. She brought a sense of calm and stability that he hadn't realized he needed. For the first time in years, Matthew allowed himself to envision a future that wasn't defined by the betrayal of his past. Kinley, on the other hand, reached out one final time. She called Matthew late one evening, her voice trembling. "Matthew, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Truly sorry. For everything." Matthew listened in silence, his emotions a mix of anger, sadness, and pity. "Kinley," he finally said, "I've moved on. I've built a life for myself and the kids that doesn't include you or Liam. I hope you find a way to do the same." Kinley's sobs were audible through the phone, but Matthew felt no satisfaction, only closure. "Goodbye, Kinley," he said softly before ending the call. Years later, as Matthew stood at his daughter's high school graduation, pride swelling in his chest, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The pain, the betrayal, the struggle, it had all been worth it to see his children happy and thriving. Amber stood beside him, her hand in his, a symbol of the new life he had built. Looking back, Matthew realized that the aftermath of the betrayal had given him something he never expected: freedom. Freedom from lies, from toxic relationships, from the weight of the past. And in that freedom, he had found happiness. The hall was alive with music and laughter, the joy of celebration palpable as Matthew sat at his table, watching his daughter twirl across the dance floor in her wedding gown. Her smile lit up the room, and her new husband, a kind, respectful young man, looked at her as though she were the center of his universe. Matthew's chest swelled with pride and emotion. This was the culmination of years of struggle, sacrifice, and growth. Amber, now his wife of 3 years, leaned over and squeezed his hand. "She's radiant, isn't she?" she said, her eyes glistening with tears. Matthew nodded, unable to take his eyes off his daughter. "She is. It's hard to believe this is the same little girl who used to climb into my lap with skinned knees, demanding a pancake bandage." Amber chuckled. "You've done a remarkable job, Matthew. She's a testament to your love and dedication." The sound of glass clinking drew his attention. It was time for the speeches. Matthew's daughter's best friend spoke first, recounting funny anecdotes and heartfelt memories that had everyone laughing and tearing up in turn. Then it was Matthew's turn. He stood, the room quieting as all eyes turned to him. He raised his glass, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Today, I'm not just a proud father. I'm a grateful man, grateful to see my daughter marry a man who cherishes her, and grateful for the journey that brought us here." He paused, looking directly at his daughter. "You've taught me so much, sweetheart, about resilience, love, and the importance of family. Not just the family we're born into, but the family we choose and create." Matthew's words were met with applause, and he took his seat again, his heart full. Later, as the night wound down, his daughter approached him, her face glowing with happiness. "Dad," she said, taking his hand, "thank you for everything. For being my rock, for never giving up on us." Matthew smiled, his throat tight with emotion. "It's been the greatest honor of my life to be your father." Meanwhile, far from the joyous celebration, Kinley and Liam's lives were shadows of what they once had been. Kinley lived alone in a small apartment, her days filled with quiet regret. She had heard about the wedding, but hadn't expected an invitation. She spent the day looking at old photos, her heart heavy with what could have been. Liam, too, had faced the consequences of his actions. His business failure had left him in debt, and his relationships, both personal and professional, were strained. The once charismatic man now avoided social gatherings, unable to face the judgment of others. Back at the wedding, the band struck up a slow song. Amber took Matthew's hand, pulling him to the dance floor. "Come on, Mr. Father of the Bride. Let's show them how it's done." Matthew laughed, allowing her to lead him to the center of the room. As they danced, he felt a profound sense of peace. He had survived betrayal and heartbreak, emerging stronger and happier. For the first time in years, he felt truly grateful, not for what he had endured, but for what he had built from the ashes. As the song ended, Matthew raised his glass one final time. "To new beginnings, he said, his voice steady and clear. To family, the one we choose and the one we make. The room erupted in cheers and applause, the sound carrying with it the promise of a bright future. For Matthew, this was more than a toast. It was a declaration, a testament to the life he had reclaimed and the happiness he had found.